You're listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with host Doc Martin. Stay tuned in or call in. You won't want to miss what's happening next. How do you step into your maximum potential? How do you connect your spiritual drive with your physical path? Stick around as Doc Martin takes listeners on a journey through the seen and unseen, the accepted and the unbelievable. Get ready to meet the maximum you the world needs on Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin now. Everybody, welcome back. I'm Doc Martin with Maximum Medicine Radio, and I am so thrilled I have Dr. Dawson Church with me. Those of you who have ever done tapping will know him. He has done it for how many years now, Dawson? Have you been?
About 20 years now, tapping and meditation now 50 years. So a long time.
50. Excellent. So what I know about Dawson, and I'm just meeting him in person for the first time, but it's all about helping us get over our stress, our trauma. And even if we don't have trauma, maybe the day is just hard and we want to calm down a little. So Dawson has written many books. He wrote a book several years ago, The Genie in Your Genes, which I have yet to read, but it's about basically how your thoughts can change the milieu outside of your DNA, but that's where all the downstream processes happen. And along with that, I'm reading now his book, Bliss Brain, which, by the way, I love. I'm about a third of the way into it. And Dawson, tell us more, because you're involved in so much.
Well, they really do form a continuum. So I wrote Genie in Your Genes after I'd worked intensively for a few years with Dr. Bruce Lipton. And Bruce's brilliant book, The Biology of Belief, talks all about how our beliefs, our thoughts, these are intangible things out there. And he argues that these intangible things, just thought and belief and ideas, can literally be affecting ourselves. And he gives a lot of examples there. I then got into the whole deep idea of epigenetics as a driver of our cell metabolism and our health that results from things that are intangible, like our ideas, like our worldviews, and like our spiritual experiences. And so I began to collect the evidence after I'd worked with Bruce on the impact of psychological and emotional experiences on gene expression. And when I published the first edition of the book in 2005, I had to look around, and there really weren't any direct studies that showed this. There were a few that showed that if you change your psychospiritual state, that things like cortisol are affected. So we know that cortisol goes up. If you're stressed, it goes down. If you're unstressed, and as it goes down, all kinds of really good biological substances increase. But there was no direct evidence of that. But I made a pretty compelling case in 2005 for that. But then by 2012, there were 12 studies that I put into the next edition of the book. And finally, the most recent edition of the book, there are hundreds of studies showing that these things affect gene expression. Every single thought you think is literally turning genes on and off in your cells. Some of the research into EFT, and again, at the very end of the program, we're going to do we're conspiring together before we were on the air to actually do an actual practical exercise with you to end with. And this exercise, literally in epigenetic studies, is turning genes on and off in your body. So that was the huge insight I had in the early 2000s. From there, I began to think about, well, if it's affecting molecules inside your body, how might your thoughts be affecting molecules outside your body? And I certainly know that we can't dream of a 5-story building in our backyard and we just make it materialize. But there was intriguing evidence that as our thoughts change, the world outside of our bodies changes as well. So in my next book, Mind to Matter, I put together all the scientific evidence that links our thoughts to things out there. Thoughts inside here, things out there, and there's really good evidence of that. And then the stuff I couldn't get into Mind to Matter was just the extraordinary blissful states we get into when we tap, meditate, and do all these things. And so I knew I had to write a book just to explain to people how happy you can get even in the midst of disaster. So that brings us up to date.
Wonderful. And I love many things about all this, but one of the things I love is science has been so slow to find ways to actually show what we have, at least spiritual people, mystics, people who meditate have known. They've experientially known it. The ancient medicine men and women knew it. And nowadays in our modern technology, oh, well, we don't have a blah, blah, blah study, blah, blah, blah. And what I love is now we're finally starting to get some pieces directly. And for me, it's to satisfy those who need the clinical trials. I personally don't. I've experienced things enough that for me, that's my own internal science. But so I love to see that. And so that when is that coming?
Yeah.
Your mind to matter.
And then there's an old Gnostic saying, dates back more than 4,000 years. It says, to the person who has had the experience, no explanation is necessary. To the person who has not had the experience, no explanation is possible. So you're right. We have these experiences and we just change. I mean, the person who's had a revelation experience, the person who's hit a mystical peak and then suddenly find their whole life changing as a result of that mystical experience. These experiences are utterly transformative. There's a cool literature, I won't get too deep into this here, but there's a cool literature of people who have instantaneous experiences of change. Like there are people who will have an epiphany and suddenly they quit smoking, or they will have a meditation that's really profound and they'll meet some kind of spirit animal or spirit guide and they'll quit using drugs, or they will quit binge eating, or they will quit some lifetime habit they've had, just like that. So it's interesting. Often change is slow. Change can be really quick, and that's just what I celebrate. But then science comes along, and often many years later, sometimes decades later, says, "Now that's interesting. What's going on there?" And then we measure, first of all, the extent of change. So we use an anxiety measure or a pain measure or a depression measure or a traumatic stress measure. We say, aha, like with EFT, I'm doing a pain workshop soon. And we know from all the studies that people who do EFT tapping, which we'll do with you in a little while, that in that kind of a session, the average drop in pain is about 2/3. People lose 2/3 of their chronic pain, their acute pain, whatever it might be. And so we now have science measuring the extent of change. And then finally, we ask the question, why? What's going on in the body when that happens? And that's called the mechanisms research. Now we're finding out, oh, it's this hormone that's going down. It's this immune factor that's going up. It's this enzyme that's increasing. It's this brainwave that's getting bigger. It is this gene that is getting dialed up. So we finally are able then to know the mechanisms of change. That often doesn't happen with penicillin. The time between Alexander Fleming's discovery that this mold was inhibiting bacteria and discovering how penicillin worked was about 40 years. So it takes a long time to figure that out.
What I love about and pain, if you can make headway there, we know there's an opiate crisis in the United States, well, probably around the world. But here are things medicines that help pain, but they come with so many downstream consequences. And if we can shift things without using an addictive medicine, wouldn't that be great? That would really.
And we can shift all kinds of things without using medicine. And so what I encourage people to do is look for those things. And one of the things that strikes me is the disparity of access to information like this. And so I and you and people who read in our field, we know there's all this amazing natural medicine out there. The mainstream person going into Kaiser, going into St. Joseph's Healthcare, going into the average hospital has no clue that stuff even exists. And when you know both of those things, you get the best of all worlds.
Mm-hmm. And what the other thing that you said that I wanted to reflect on was, I've had that happen to me where I'll be in something, say a job stress. And I'll turn one day to my girlfriend because she's now got it um, as a reminder to me of how my thoughts will shift and my reality will shift. I'll turn to her and I'll say, I'm done. And that's as if I'm actually expressing that there was something that flipped. It flipped and nothing is the same. Um, Sometimes we want things, we want that answer to things we struggle with. I haven't been able to quite manifest it when I when I say it to be so. Anyway,
Well,
but
what I asked in my book, Mind to Matter, that book came out in 2017. And the real question in Mind to Matter was, so you've hit the nail on the head with an observation there. Some things is easy. Like I decide I'm going to change this part of my life, and I just change it within a few days, a few weeks. Another part of my life, even now in my life, like I'll tell you something embarrassing. I was on a show this morning, and this host said, "Well, Dawson, you've been meditating on and off, and pretty much continuously for the last 20 years, on and off for 50 years. When did the mind chatter go away?" And I said, never. This morning in my meditation, I'm wrestling with mind chatter. And it's like, I get so frustrated with myself sometimes. It's like, why am I still dealing with this after 50 years? And then that's just part of being human. We have to be loving and accepting ourselves with our imperfections. We aren't flawless people. We never will be. We'll always have challenges. So there are areas that shift very quickly, and there are areas we struggle with for a long time. I have a practitioner still. I go to therapy still. As well as training therapists, I go to therapy because I need it myself.
right. Well, I love this topic, and we're going to talk more. We're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to get deeper into tapping and the benefits that it can do. So we'll take a short break now. Hi, everybody. We're back. I'm Doc Martin, and I have Dr. Dawson Church with me. I'm so happy. I just want to get you guys ready because we're going to talk some more about EFT, emotional freedom technique, or tapping. And then after we're finished talking, we're going to break. And when we come back, we're going to go through the process. So those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, you'll have a chance to type in your responses as Dawson leads us through. So get ready to do that. We'll be doing that after we talk a little bit and explain tapping. So Dawson, how did you get into tapping? How did you learn it?
Like many people, from a point of misery, I was a teenager. I was really stressed. I was very anxious. I had PTSD. I had severe depression. I was suicidal often. And I just was so miserable. I tell the story in my book, Bliss Brain, how one day when I was 15 years old, I walked past a full-length mirror, and I just stopped and stared at myself in the mirror. And I had long, long curly hair and these bell-bottom trousers, blue jeans on, and bag of books around my shoulder. And I just looked at my eyes, and this thought popped into my mind that said, those are the saddest eyes I've ever seen. I realized I was so depressed. I had to fix myself. So I went and joined a spiritual community, lived communally for a number of years on and off for the next 15 years or so. I began to study psychology. I learned various kinds of therapy. I really wanted to try and crack the nut of happiness. And I got a little bit happier using all of those therapies, especially Gestalt therapy. I really like Gestalt therapy, still teach Gestalt therapy. But in 2000, I stumbled across EFT after learning to meditate again in my 40s. In my 40s, I made the decision one day, I'm going to meditate absolutely every single morning without fail. And when I made that decision and began to meditate imperfectly every morning, my mind was wandering. I was still not a good meditator even after 30 years of doing it on and off. But I began to do it every single day. And that consistency brought rewards. I began to learn other energy therapies. I eventually met Donna Eden, David Feinstein, who wrote the book Energy Medicine. I met Jim Oshman, the biologist, who wrote another book called Energy Medicine. And I got into that whole world of energy therapies, and I got deep into EFT. And the transformations I witnessed, like I watched one woman in a workshop, and she was a survivor of prolonged sexual abuse as a child. And I watched as the layers just fell off her of trauma. She worked through layer after layer after layer of traumatization. Now, we can do pretty slick things in Gestalt therapy. And if I'd had that woman in therapy for about 10 years, I would have gotten somewhere. But I watched as in just a maybe 40-minute session, she just shed tons of her life stress. So I realized it was possible with energy therapies to get there quickly. So we had to study them. I got certified in them. I trained in them. I eventually wrote the newest edition of the EFT manual. I then also formulated a standard called clinical EFT, because there are all these like methods of EFT. It's not a trademarked or copyrighted term. Anyone can call themselves an EFT practitioner. And so EFT was all over the place. And I led a group to codify this and do hard science research into it. So there are now over 100 clinical trials. We call that clinical EFT. And it is so effective. It really works. It just is dramatic to take a veteran, say, I worked with one young man who on his first week in Iraq, one of his friends was killed. And so there he was, devastated by the loss of his friend. He was a combat medic. And so his job was to clean his friend's uniform to send back to his family at home. And so he had this uniform that had been in the sun for a few days. It smelled terrible. And there he had to clean his friend's uniform and the helmet and all the blood and gore. And I mean, this young man was traumatized. He was a 10 out of 10 for emotional triggering, telling the story of cleaning the uniform. It smelled so bad, he had to literally run outside the medic hut, take a deep breath, run back inside, do a little bit of cleaning with bleach, run back outside because he couldn't even breathe. The uniform smelled so terrible. And so we worked on the smells and the memories and all the intensity of that trauma with EFT. And it just all went away. It went away in probably about 15 minutes of tapping. So I watched people break through like this over and over and over again using these proven methods of clinical EFT, and then began to teach it. We now have the biggest training program in the world. We train people. We train thousands of people every year. We have a certification program. We certify them in clinical EFT. Now with Zoom, I love Zoom because you can do EFT with people all over the world. I set up a site called tappingplace.com where you can literally log on to Tapping Place and do a session with a certified practitioner, live video in real time, whatever bothers you. So it's just opening up possibilities of really reaching people worldwide with that message that you don't have to suffer anymore. The pain, the depression, the anxiety can go away, and it can happen fast.
I love that. How do you think tapping works? Other than obviously, I believe there's an energetic component that perhaps we can't prove scientifically yet anyway, but how do you think it works?
Yeah, we can't see energy in the same, like Don Eden literally sees energy around people. Cindy Dale, other talented, gifted people can see energy. And what we know though from biological measures is that when we put people in an MRI, so they're lying in an MRI, and you have them think about something that triggers them emotionally, you see the emotional part of the brain light up. That part of the brain, usually shown in MRI studies, it gets red. So there's a baseline of gray. And then as your level of brain intensity, brain function increases, it goes yellow, orange, red. As it decreases, it usually goes light blue, dark blue, purple. So there's this range of intensity. And when people are in an MRI, you see, as they're thinking about a stressful thought, you see their emotional brain get red. Then it's amazing. You take them for an EFT session, you work with them on whatever bothered them, and then you put them back in the MRI, and you have them think that same thought, that same stressor, like thinking about the helmet, thinking about the uniform, cleaning the uniform, and they're calm and their brains no longer get triggered. So one mechanism is that the emotional limbic system of the brain is no longer triggered after EFT. Another one is epigenetic. We know from several studies that it changes your level of gene expression. And in one study, really interesting study, the researchers looked at the level of gene expression of people who got either a placebo treatment or EFT. And nothing happened after the placebo, but after an hour of EFT, 72 genes were dialed up in function. So the function of 72 genes increased, including genes that combat throat cancer, rectal cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, genes that combat cognitive decline, genes that protect our skin from the sun's ultraviolet rays. All these beneficial genes upregulated by only 1 hour of EFT. So second mechanism is epigenetic. And then there are also hormonal things that happen. And so levels of stress hormones like cortisol drop. They actually drop quickly and fast and a lot dramatically. And when they drop, the cool thing about our body systems is as stress goes down and the relaxation response goes up, then all kinds of beneficial things happen, like immune function increases, cell metabolism increases. So in one study we did, we found that cortisol over the course of a week dropped by 34% after EFT. Immunoglobulins, which are these molecules, antibodies that protect our cells from coronaviruses, those immune antibodies rose over the course of the week by 113%. So as cortisol goes down, immunoglobulins go up. And so we're now tracing, and these again are called the physiological mechanisms of action by which EFT has its effects.
And are the tapping points sending particular energetic signals? Are you activating a certain neural loop?
They are the endpoints of acupuncture meridians, and you can measure them. So we have little instruments that measure galvanic skin response. You can actually measure where they are on the body. And so we know that they're there. We know that they're in the position shown on those ancient acupuncture points. And so when you tap on those particular points, people's stress levels go down. Research has been done as to whether you can tap on sham points and how those compare to real points. And the result of that research showed that tapping on sham points has some effect, tapping on the real points has more effect. So those acupuncture meridians aren't easy to measure, but they are possible to detect them with certain instruments. And when you tap on them, we find that people's stress levels go down. And then again, all those other things like heart rate variability, gene expression, brain waves, and brain function changes as well.
Well, one of the things, and I think it was in your newsletter, you directed us to a practitioner, I forget her name, maybe Jennifer, somebody, who had a video and she used a galvanometer.
Yes.
Where she actually showed that this is the spot because watch, and she showed the correct spots by actually showing the needle move, which I thought was wonderful.
Yeah, it's on our YouTube channel. Yes.
So that was really good. So do you want to tell us briefly about the tapping sequence before we take a break and do the practice? Do you think if we ran through that didactically first, would that be beneficial?
Yeah, we can look at where the points are. And so the body, the idea, the theory of acupuncture is that we have energy meridians in our bodies, and that these meridians have points on them. When you get acupuncture, the acupuncturist is inserting a needle at a certain meridian point, and then these meridians end at certain points. And so where you tap is the meridian endpoints. And the ones we use in EFT are, first of all, the side of the hand point over here. And again, it's just called the SOH, or side of hand point. We tap on the top of head point. This is part of the governing meridian that runs all the way down, up and down the back, over the top of the head, and ends right over here. That's the governing meridian. We also tap on the eyebrow point over here, which is where your eyebrow meets the bridge of your nose. And that is part of the bladder meridian, which terminates right below your eyebrow. This is on the side of your eye here is the gallbladder meridian. And we tap on this point, and you can kind of detect it by rubbing your finger and feeling your skull, and you'll feel this little like indentation in your skull there. That's the end point of the meridian. Then under your eye is, under the pupil of your eye, there's a point, and you can find that again. You just move your hand around on your skull, you'll feel a little hollow there at the meridian. And then again, the governing meridian endpoint is over here. The central meridian, or conception vessel in acupuncture, ends right below the lower lip. And that's another point we use. There's a point where the collarbone meets the breastbone. So it's right where the collarbone and breastbone come together. Then just about 1.5 inches or 3 centimeters out from that, there's a little hollow in your chest, and we tap or rub that point. And then about 4 inches below the armpit on the side, about 10 centimeters down, there's a point there that we use. And then finally, we end up with that same side of hand points. Those are the points we use in EFT. There are optional points, and like I have 1-day workshops where I teach them to people. We have 4-day workshops to learn to use EFT professionally with people. And so if you want to really take a deep dive into EFT or use it with other people, with your kids, with family members, with clients, take a workshop, because that's where you learn all about clinical EFT. But those are the basic points, and you'll literally, as we tap on them in the next segment, you'll literally feel your emotional intensity dropping away.
Well, I started reading, and I that's why I want to do that. I can't wait to do this practice with you, because I want to see it. But I have my real, my day-to-day job is, what they say, don't quit your day job. Well, my day job is very stressful. COVID, I'm in a physician office. It's a mess. But I found, even though I haven't totally gotten the process back, just doing that is enough to break that ruminating anxiety loop that's starting about, oh my God, now do that. And it literally breaks the cycle. And it's something that's even more profound of a stressor. I can just imagine or feel that you do the entire process. Wow. Because just this is from, oh my gosh, the patients are backing up. I hate being late. I haven't done this. I have to call this person. And I start to feel myself getting breathless, and I'll just do that. And it's like, it diffuses it instantly.
Another thing I'd recommend is just tapping all the points between patients, because you're going to be influenced by some of the emotional residue of their pain, their anxiety, and their stress. And so if you can just let go, like Judith Orloff is a good friend of mine, and she's a wonderful psychiatrist at UCLA, and she does a quick round of energy release between patients. It only takes to tap each point. Let's just timing it right now. If we just tap each point briefly, and imagine you're between patient sessions, and all you're doing is releasing the stress from each acupressure meridian. And it just took their, whatever it was, 15 seconds to tap them all. And that'll then reset your energy system so you're fresh for the next person.
And I think what I also hear, and I get it energetically, that influx of everybody else's field. And as a physician, as any practitioner, you want to resonate and connect to the field, to understand them, but you also then take with you contamination, debris, leftover, as you said, residue. So that's really good to think that that's just a real clearing. Thank you. I will do that. That'll be exciting.
I did it in my way in and out of Walmart.
Take this, Walmart. I'll take home the toilet paper, but sorry, not taking anything else.
Not the stress.
No, not the stress. So anything else we need to talk about before we go and do it?
A couple of things. I recommend EFT for short-term release of stress. Also, you can use it proactively and go and work on childhood stuff. Like we find that, for example, if you look at the studies into veterans who have been in Iraq or Afghanistan, And those that get PTSD, roughly 1/3 of them, and the 2/3 that don't get PTSD, the difference is their childhoods. If their childhoods were stressful, if there was abuse or neglect, they tend to get PTSD as adults. If their childhoods weren't, they're more resilient as adults. So what I really recommend people do, we all know from the famous adverse childhood experiences study that a high level of childhood adverse experiences as adults results in cancer, heart disease, diabetes, all kinds of ills as adults. So the other way to use EFT is just not just to reduce stress you have temporarily, it's also to go back and work on your childhood. So think about people who injured you, situations that were stressful or tense, and then one by one, just let those go. Because we found that people often they're worried about their boss, they're worried about their child, they're worried about their marriage. When we get down to it and find out what the source of the anxiety is, it turns out to be a parent, a bully at school, a sibling that hurt them, and then you go and resolve that issue, suddenly they find resources in the adult situation. So it's really worth going and doing clearing of your childhood. Do it at tappingplace.com. Do it yourself. Go to our website. Just download the free EFT mini manual from my website. Just tap yourself as you remember your stressors. If you get too triggered, there are always practitioners. There are hundreds of certified clinical EFT practitioners. They can work with you. They can work on the overwhelming stuff. But the small stuff, you can take care of yourself with self-help. Like at Fort Hood, I worked at Fort Hood in groups of soldiers with PTSD, and we taught them EFT for self-help. Did they still need therapy? Absolutely. They needed that time with a psychologist, a psychotherapist, to help them through their battle trauma. But when they were faced with a traumatic situation or a trigger, they didn't have the therapist there. They had to deal with it themselves. Like one young man I worked with, he was so angry in the therapy circle, he said, I was almost late getting here because the idiot guard here at the gate of Fort Hood was taking so long to check people in. I was so angry at this guy, I could have pulled out my pistol and shot him. And I'm sitting there like, that's just a tapping on that. Because I mean, there have been people who did pull out their pistol and shoot people at Fort Hood. So we got him tapping, we got him calm, we got him into, so there's no therapist in the car with him there, but he can do this and he can calm himself down. So it's really important to learn it is a self-soothing device for small issues, and then see a trained clinical EFT practitioner for the big issues, and then meditate. Meditation is the great leveler. Meditation is what starts you out at the beginning of every day, and you frame your day in a positive way by beginning with that anchoring in the beyond. You're letting go of what I call in my books local mind. And we all have this local reality we deal with, our local selves, our local world, our jobs, our kids, our cars, our houses, our money. But there's non-local mind, and non-local mind is what makes the flowers bloom and the seasons change and the earth go around the sun. And so you want to really cultivate your relationship with non-local mind. And that means letting go of your grip on local mind and letting yourself be absorbed in that state of oneness with the universe every single day in meditation. It just makes you super happy. That's why I wrote my newest book, Bliss Brain, because I found myself becoming super happy. And I wanted to share with people, hey, you can get crazy happy. In studies of Tibetan monks, the difference between baseline and where they are in meditation is 25 times the level of happiness brainwaves as they are when they start out. So you can get 25 times as happy as you are right now.
I love that. I also love that it's relatively simple. Meditation, perhaps not as simple as tapping, and it's free, and you take it, it's portable. You take it with you. You don't need any contraptions. You don't need any paraphernalia. So let's just take a quick break. And when we come back, Dawson is going to show us how to do this amazing tapping technique. We'll be right back. Okay, everybody, we're so excited. We're going to do the tapping process. Dawson is going to lead us. Those of you who are live streaming on Facebook, when he indicates, you get to put in your numbers before and after. Anyway, he'll explain it to you. Here we go.
Okay, so to begin with, I want to ask you to think about an event that triggers you emotionally when you think of it now, and that happened no more than 2 weeks ago. So don't think back to a childhood event, don't think back to an early life traumatic event, stick with a current life one. And the reason I'm saying that is I don't want you to get overwhelmed. Often childhood trauma carries a huge emotional charge. You don't want to try and deal with that on a radio show. You want to deal with that with a therapist when you're face to face with somebody on tappingplace.com and they can take care of you. So pick something that is no more than 2 weeks old and that has an emotional charge to it. So that's the first thing. Think about an event that happened. And I'll just give you a moment to think about an event. And then give that event a title. If that event were a movie, what would the movie title be? If there'd been a security camera videotaping that event, what would you entitle that clip? So give it a title. So you've got your event, you've got your title. Now, as you think about the event, give it a number in terms of emotional intensity. And that number should be from 0, meaning no emotional intensity, to 10, which is maximum intensity. So as triggered emotionally as you could possibly be is a 10 out of 10. Being calm, thinking about the event is a 0. And this is an amazing process because you're going to test your results. Here's my before number, here's my after number, and you'll see for yourself how effective this is and how quickly it works. Now, you don't have to tell anybody what your event is. Like if I tell you my event is called the Green Box, you have no idea. That could be a present I got from somebody that was really a disappointment to me. That green box could be a place I store my father's ashes. The green box could be the container a syringe came in for chemotherapy medication. I mean, you have no idea what that green box means. So just the green box is all you need to know by way of a title. So you don't necessarily need to disclose what your whole movie is when you're doing EFT with somebody. So think about your movie title and get your level of triggering 0 to 10. Now, Sharon, I asked you if you wouldn't mind doing the same thing. And would you mind sharing with us what your movie title is and your number is?
It's all about the money. And the number is 9 or 10. It's way up there.
I'm just putting this in chat. It's all about the money. Now, that's a great example of a title that is non-disclosing. And when we're working with war veterans, we're working with people who've been hurt in various ways, they often don't want to disclose what they did or what was done to them. And keeping it neutral with a title like that is one way of doing this. EFT works just as well, whether we know all the stories or we don't. So it's all about the money. It's a 9 or a 10. One other question. Where do you feel it in your body?
My chest, my breathing, my belly.
So your chest, your breathing, your belly. And you can feel your breathing changing as you think of it?
I feel tight, and my belly, I feel it start to get angry.
So you feel a tightness in your belly when you think about this.
Yeah. And like the feeling you get when you're about to go into warrior mode, when you need to get yourself girded to go and fight something.
Okay, so you're really in touch with the emotion. That's important because often once we've had bad experiences, we really don't want to go feel those unpleasant physical feelings and emotions again. But with EFT, it's really worth feeling them because now you're lighting up all those neural pathways, you're lighting up the emotional midbrain, and then the tapping will rapidly remove all the emotional stress from that. So we'll go now through a generic round of tapping. I won't make it specific to you. I'll just make it generic for everyone, but think about your particular issue.
Okay.
So we'll start here and say either out loud or in your mind, this bad thing happened. This really did happen. And I'm emotionally triggered as I think about that. And even though I'm emotionally triggered as I think about the bad thing, I also simultaneously recognize that I'm safe right now. Bad though this thing may have been, right this very moment, I'm safe. I'm sitting here watching a program and I'm safe. Okay, now focus on the bad thing, tap the top of your head, that governing meridian. I'm safe and the bad thing happened. That bad thing really did happen. It triggered a huge emotional response, very naturally, because it was terrible. Should never have happened. And it did happen. Tap your eyebrow point. Think about who said that, who did that, what all the details of the scene were, what you saw and heard, if there were any smells, scents, or tastes, or physical touch sensations, think about those. Side of your eye, this bad thing really happened. I wish it hadn't happened, but it did happen. Under your eye, and I now vividly recall all the sights and sounds, taste, touch, and smell, all the details of that bad event. Under your nose. That should never have happened, but that did happen. Central meridian, under your lower lip. The bad thing that happened. Collarbone. All the details of this bad thing. Under your arm, about 4 inches down. All the parts of that memory. Side of hand again. And even though that bad thing happened, I'm okay now. I'm safe. Okay, now we're going to take a quick break and then do something else. But in this quick break, just let me know your new number. So you were 10, 9 or 10 before. What number are you right now?
3.
We want to do something else that's going to shift you. This is a way of bringing the brain into theta and delta. So the brain waves of stress are beta, this high frequency wave from 13 to 20 cycles per second. We want to reduce that and increase slow, calm brain waves. And this little trick does that. So you tap here on the back of your hand. This is triple Wellbeing meridian in acupuncture. And then you keep your head steady, but you look up with your eyes. Don't move your whole head up. Keep your head horizontal, but just move your eyes up to look way up as high as you can, like at the ceiling. Now imagine you're looking at a giant clock. You're looking at the numeral 12. Move your eyes to 1, now to 2. Move your eyes to 3, 4, 5, 6. Keep tapping. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. Just pause there, take a breath at 3. Think again about the bad thing that happened and your title of your movie. Now I'll go from 3 to 2 to 1 to 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 12, 11, 10, back the other way, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, reverse, 2, 1, 12, 11, 10, 9, back to 10, 11, 12, and stop. And I've given your eyes more of a workout than they've had in the last 10 years. But that just drives your brain into these slow waves of delta and theta. And those are the waves you have when you're dreaming. In dreams, our brains are working out problems in rapid eye movement sleep when we're in theta, and they're pruning negative memories and unused neural pathways when we're in non-rapid eye movement sleep in delta and deep sleep. So our brains are in delta most of the night and neural pruning. Then they go to neural wiring for brief periods of rapid eye movement theta sleep. And the eye movements put you into those theta and delta states. So what is your new number now?
0.
0. Yay!
So let me share with you what we have 3 minutes left, what you probably have heard from many of your clients and other practitioners. But there was a point as the number was coming down from 10 to 7 to 6, when I just started smiling because it was so, everything about the worry was so ludicrous. And when I did the eyes, it's like you had to laugh, because how could you hold? There was no point in holding that bad thing. It had it lost its meaning. So even the awareness that all of a sudden it had lost its meaning, what made me laugh. And I was like, you've got to be kidding. What am I worrying about that for? Because I physiologically could not worry at that moment.
I'm so happy to hear that.
That I thing is very powerful.
So you see, nothing's changed about the world. That thing still happened. But now you've gone through what's called in psychology a cognitive shift. You see the world differently. And I can tell you this works for the pandemic. This works for the financial crash. This works for your body. This works for your work situations, works for your family. Those things don't change immediately. They do start to change over time, but the way you see them changes. And in the great phrase of Wayne Dyer, when the way you see things changes, the way things are, things you see change. So that's the way EFT is so transformative.
And what I love that you mentioned Wayne Dyer. I'm so sorry he's not with us anymore, at least not on these planes. But when he says, what was his book, Spiritual Solution to Every Problem, shifting it into the energetics, which I also consider spiritual, the whole thing changes, doesn't it?
Changes dramatically, and the solutions you come up with at that level of energy and mind and thought and non-local consciousness, when you're tuned into the universe and you're channeling and downloading all the joy and love and peace and wisdom in the universe, your whole life starts to change. So that's what meditation gives you, access to that state of oneness with the universe. You bring it into everyday life. Things start to shift. You tap away your trauma, and within a few weeks, you will see radical change. In one study we just finished, 4 weeks resulted in brain anatomy changes measurable on an MRI.
Well, we have to close, which is too bad, because I have really loved being with you. Thank you so much for doing all the exploration of these and getting down into the science of it. So maybe we can convince the more academic types to believe in it. Dawson, I'm so glad you were here with us, and thank you so much.
It's been a joy and delight, a privilege. Thank you.
Jacob, thank you. And everybody, thanks for being with us. We'll be back next month, Maximum Medicine. I'm Doc Martin, and be sure to watch this video later. It's archived on Transformation Talk Radio website. Dawson, thank you a million for being here.
It's a joy and a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Good night.
You've been listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin. Tune in next time while the doc talks health, spirituality, and the impact your beliefs have on every part of who you are, body and soul. Doc Martin unpacks the challenges we face as human beings and teaches callers to open the door between the scientific and the mystical. To learn more about Doc Martin and Maximum Medicine, visit www.sharonmartinmd.com.